the return of the king, the greatest fighter of the 2010s, arguably.
Ever, Luke.
Maybe even ever. Well, that's what he's working towards, is Jon Jones. He will defend his light heavyweight crown against upstart Dominick Reyes. This will be at the Toyota Center, in Houston, Texas. All right, let's play a little game here, if we can.
I like to play.
Let me pitch to you first, because I did the Dissected, and on it, I didn't do a reason to believe or not believe that Reyes might win, but rather, what does his game look like? What's he good at? What's he not so good at? So let's do it a little bit differently over here, Brian. Let's imagine you had to convince me of the case for Dominick Reyes, because I've noticed not many people believe. In fact, I got to be honest, I think so many people either don't know who he is or don't believe. They're a little bit checked out on it. People are like, wow, that 246 card was bad. The 247 one's even worse.
It is even worse, let's be
Now,
really honest about that.
I'm a big fan of Dominick Reyes. I don't know how well he's going to do. I think Jon deserves to be your favorite. Let's play the game, though, as I indicated. Give me a really good reason, the best reason you can imagine, for why Dominick Reyes can win this fight.
I can jump out easily and say size, but I actually think Dominick Reyes' chances in this fight have a lot more to do with Jon Jones than they do with Dom Reyes. Is Reyes fully credible of being a live dog, of this being a potential Gustafsson Part 1 all over again, should Jon not take him seriously? Certainly. Dom Reyes is tall, volume striker, good leg kicks, does a lot of the functional things that you would want somebody to do to have a chance against this version of Jon Jones. The real question for me is, who exactly is this version of Jon Jones? This is an odd sort of turning point moment for Jones, potentially. Here's what I mean. He's really one win away here, Luke, from cleaning out his division for the second time. A feat you rarely see. This is Demetrius Johnson, Anderson Silva, GSP level territory, and probably a move up to heavyweight after that. Yet at the same time, the version that we've seen post-USADA, you're going to have to ask yourself, is this an efficient...
Just a clarification, are you counting the second Gustafsson fight in that?
Yes.
Looked pretty good in that fight.
It did look pretty good, but it kind of plays into what I'm saying. Are we seeing an evolved 32-year-old Jon Jones who is learning about how to be more efficient to offset the potential losses of speed and power and everything that comes with age, Luke? Or are we seeing a guy who is starting to become vulnerable? Maybe vulnerable, not so much because physically, but maybe mentally. There was a lot of, he's playing with his food being talked about, how close that Thiago Santos fight was. I just went and rewatched that this morning. I don't know how much it was playing with his food like I thought in person watching cage side, as much as it was he had a guy across from him who was going to make him pay a toll for closing distance, and he played that thing safe until the finish. If Jon Jones can fall back into that trap, Dom Reyes has to gain his respect early, has to be a volume striker, but if he can get Jon Jones to be a point fighter, the same version of Jon Jones we saw in the Maheta fight and the OSP fight, he has a chance to win this fight. If he somehow is not able to close that distance, is not able to gain that respect, then I do think he's ultimately fodder for a guy I do believe is the greatest of all time.
Yeah, so when you look at this, you think, well, what about the takedown threat from Dominick Reyes? It's not substantial. Takedown defense is interesting because Jon can get most guys down, but as we talked about on I Dissected, the second order takedown defense from Dominick Reyes is pretty good. He likes to get back to his feet. He's good about getting off the fence, and Jon doesn't like to expend a lot of energy when he doesn't have to. Speaking of which, of not expending energy, he went 5 rounds with Rashad Evans in 2012, then 4 with Vitor Belfort, just the one against Chael Sonnen, then 5 against Gustafsson, UFC 165, 5 against Teixeira, 5 against Cormier, 5 against St. Preux, 3 against Cormier, 3 against Gustafsson. Okay, but then 5 against Anthony Smith, 5 against Thiago Santos. You know what that reminds me of? That last chapter before the sabbatical of Georges St. Pierre, where he could win other ways, but he's a little bit burned out. I'm not saying that Jon is burned out. I'm talking about GSP. He was a little bit burned out, and he knew that every time there was another challenge for him, the risk for what could go wrong was elevated, and everything you've been building can just go away in an instant. So let's take the variables out of fighting. Let's just make it the safest possible way. Let's wrestle these guys to the ground. And he sort of understood that, takes the sabbatical, comes back, and he beats Michael Bisping. I think you're seeing either one of two things in those last 2 fights that you mentioned, because I think you're dead on about it. Is that a Jon Jones who, at I think 31 years old, is he finally getting old? Because 31's not old, but he's been fighting for 11, 12 years.
At the super elite level for most of that stretch.
Undefeated, basically. So that's one consideration. Maybe that's that. Or is that a little bit of truth, or maybe none at all, combined with the fact that he realizes I'm building towards something? He says it outright. He says, when there's a debate about the greatest ever, I want it to be a short debate. Well, you don't get there through losses. And you can get there through wins, even if they go 5 rounds. So if he does that, and he's a little bit conservative, that will hurt him. Fight Metric has told me that anyone who can box with him in a numerically close way can keep it. They're the ones who've done the best. So your first and second Cormier up until the last Cormier, the loss, and certainly the first Gustafsson fight, he was actually numerically outstruck in those ones with the hands. Well, that's exactly what Dominick Reyes is actually pretty good at.
That's what we're saying. The blueprint is there. The body is there. The style is there. I think it comes down to Jon's mentality. You remember the first chapter, Jon, was a seek and destroyer.
The guy who was learning the amazing moves off of YouTube.
The fact that he was combining elite level speed, power, chin with technique, that made him just transcendent, next level, superstar. He can mix in the flashy moves. He had the natural length on you. He had everything going for him. The guy we've seen the last few fights, though, is more like 93 through 98 Michael Jordan trying to add a jump shot to his career to try to, fight off the age curve. And you mentioned the second Gustafsson fight. That was an efficient masterpiece. But what he did is the moment he knew he had Gustafsson tired, he went in there and wrestled him down and finished it. He did not do that against Thiago Santos. The reason I think, having rewatched that fight, is because the threat offensively was too much there, that in Jon's mind, you're right, maybe he's going a little GSP going, you know what, I'm going to win this fight by decision. In my head, I've won this fight. But he left that back door open. And Maheta, on 2 broken down wheels, made it to that back porch. He got close. Yeah. It was split decision. It comes down to whether Jon can reactivate the mentality of the old bones. If he can, if he's looking to wrestle, if he's looking to walk down and finish, this is a fight he's going to win and has the potential to look spectacular in doing so. But if he's not going to be that straight killer that we originally loved about him, Dom Reyes is that perfect foil to give him a tough night.
The last thing I'd say about this also is, we talk about what defines greatness in MMA. Well, winning, of course, but winning in what capacity, for how long, against who, in what weight classes. And we live in this age where people are constantly changing weight classes. Jon has not done that, but I want to be very clear. I'm not here to demean what changing weight classes entails. It's incredibly difficult to do what Conor has done, to do what even going down or going up, Dominic Cruz, any of the champs who have done it, BJ Penn, Randy Couture, all of them. But what I am going to say is, I do think that the single hardest thing to do in MMA is to be a weight class, or in UFC anyway, is to be a UFC champion and then stand a post for wave after wave of challenger. Who saw Tim Elliott giving Demetrius Johnson a really tough fight? Nobody did. I'm not here to say that that's an argument specifically for Dominick Reyes, but rather it is examining the process, that process that he has been under. Dude, you got Dominick Reyes, who has never tasted defeat. And is he the athlete or the striker or the wrestler that Jon Jones is? Probably not, but you don't have to be. You just have to be on. One time they have to be sick. One time their ankle has to be not going well. One time doubt has to creep in, and everything can change.
Putting together a win streak at this level, at the title level, and sustaining it is so insane compared to other sports. There's so many ways to lose. Jon Jones could have lost his title to Anthony Smith by disqualification, Luke. It very well could have happened. It was on the verge of happening. Yes, it would have been another Matt Hamill type loss. They would have run it back. Jones probably wins it. But it just goes to show you, when you're walking that tightrope, it's hard. If you're a fan of entertainment, though, you want to see Jones go back to his Mr. Brownstone days. You want to see him go out there and finish this guy. Maybe be a little wild outside the cage. Just go out there. You don't want him being so focused on protecting the legacy, like you mentioned, that it could change his style and the chances that he takes inside the cage. Because when you've got a Thiago Santos with 2 hurt legs just asking to be taken down and submitted, and you don't attempt that, the old bones would have been in that. He would have been up in that piece.
Does on paper, does Dominick Reyes look like the toughest challenge Jon's ever faced? Probably not. I would probably look at some other ones and say, well, Daniel Cormier seems like a much tougher challenge. On the other hand, Brian, you've got a guy in Dominick Reyes, as I mentioned, never tasted defeat. And if you ask Dominick Reyes, do you think you can win this fight? Unequivocally, he thinks he can win this fight. He is ready to rock. And he got taken down in the Uzdemir fight, but he knows that Jon is a wrestling threat. Like, there's so much tape on Jon. It's not a secret what he's good at. It's not a secret what he's bad at. So it'll be a question about whether or not Dominick Reyes is the guy to implement that. But this is what I mean, dude. Every time Jon goes out there, the book is written on him. Now, maybe it's an open book test, and those can often be harder than the closed book tests. But still, I take Dominick Reyes very seriously. I bet you even if John's saying all this stuff like he was a scrub and he was never an athletically gifted guy.
Just in the last 12 hours, John's still going ham on Twitter against
Yeah, but you know who's not? Mike Winklejohn, Greg Jackson, Brandon Gibson. They take him very, very seriously. And in the end, I don't think Jon is training like a chump either. So Jon can win this. Jon probably will and should. But I'm not sleeping on Dominick Reyes even a little bit.
Yeah, if Jon wakes up to the potential of what that wake-up call against Thiago Santos could be, we should see the old Jon again. But it's just interesting. We never talk about the mentality of somebody who loses after the fact. But Dom Reyes has passed all the tests in terms of just listening to his media scrum in Los Angeles last week. He talked about that first time at that press conference going head-to-head with Jon Jones. First time he was ever in the same area as him and just not being impressed by the aura and just going, to the length of he's just another man in front of me. Again, something we hear all the time from an opponent. But I'm just saying if it's one of those things where after the fact we go back and look at it, he seems to be dialed into where he needs to be. Look, Jon Jones has a historic chin when you look back in some of the big moments.
Takes huge shots, yeah.
But Reyes is a guy who, if Jones is going to leave that back door open, could lose a decision. It's
also, I pointed this out on Dissected. One of the ways in which Jon gets hit a little bit is sometimes he hangs on in the clinch with a little bit of space. Who's got some of the best uppercuts in the light heavyweight division? It's Dominick Reyes.